The Seattle Mariners are 4 wins away from their first ever World Series appearance, but the team they came into the league with 48 years ago stands in their way.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Saturday, October 11th, 2025. This is Tiding Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And as always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone, and on there we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/control the zone. Link in the description. Pleased to be joined again by Anders Hirst of the Mariners POSTCAST to help us preview the ALCS between the Mariners and Toronto Blue Jays. The show is going to go more or less the same as the last time we had Anders on. I got some burning questions for these guys heading into the series, so we're just going to go down the list and chat a little bit about this one. So to get us started here, real quick, let's put the ALDS to rest. Who's your ALDS MVP for the Mariners, Anders?
Ooh, just hard hitting right off the rip. I've got to go Andres Munoz. When the rest of the bullpen was shaky at best, he's the only one who never faltered, giving just nails performance after nails performance. You could shout out Cal Raleigh too, obviously, with how well he played at the plate, but I got to go Andres Munoz just because he was the only guy who showed up every single time when you needed him to. Absolutely. So that's mine for the ALDS for sure.
I'll go with the guy who actually had to show up all 5 games and was really bad in one of them, but very good in the other 4. And it's kind of a guy who I claimed early this year as my breakout candidate. And I'm going to go with Bizzardo. He was really good last night. And I think people kind of forget, like, you see the same guy 5 games in a row. It's pretty easy to pick up things on that guy that you didn't know before. So yeah, dominating game 1, game 2, fine, whatever. But for him to, implode in game 4 and then bounce right back in game 5 and give you, what was it, 7 outs, 8 outs, high leverage outs against a team that has literally seen him in every other game of the series. Pretty darn impressive. It's real easy to go with Polanco. Polanco had some big hits, no question, obviously, the big hit last night, but I think most people will go with Polanco, but I'm going to give some love to the bullpen guys because for the most part, they were really good this series. Although I think all of them, except for Munoz, had a rough inning here and there. So it is what it is. But I think I'll go Bizzardo. And then, I think shout out to Polo and Munoz and also Logan Gilbert. I think probably deserves some props here for what he did yesterday. And also obviously the start in game 3. Yeah,
Gilbert was a guy that I heavily considered here. George Kirby as well, even though that, they lost in game 1. Still,
Not
like he was,
fault.
He was fantastic in this series. Fantastic, especially last night. But I'm going to go with Jorge Polanco. I mean, he was a massive reason that you beat Tarek Skubal in game 2. And obviously he has the walk-off last night. So I think that's a pretty safe call. But
So Josh Naylor, if the series is only 3 games long, he might have been the guy, but the first 2 games count. So unfortunately, But Nails was Nails after the kid came. Nails was really good. So
it's like the opposite of Julio, right? First 2 games.
Yeah.
They passed off the baton. Yeah,
sure did.
But like we talked about, I think it was after game 2, or maybe no, it was game 3. After game 3, you and I talked about this, Colby. Like it felt like Josh was close. Like he had some really good swings in the series, just had nothing to show for it. And then he has 6 hits over the final 2 games. So what are your biggest questions heading into the series, Colby?
Dan Wilson.
Okay.
Like
Just
I think he managed a pretty good game last night. I'll give him that. But it was, we talked about this last night. It was funny that basically the same exact situation came up 3 times, all of them at home. And it was, do you go to Gabe Spire? First game he didn't, home run, boom. Next game he does, gets paid off, strikeout. And then the final game he goes to him and home run. So kind of had the wide range there. But this bullpen, it feels like it's an arm short, like we've been saying for the last 2 months. and that puts Dan in some really awkward spots. And I don't know if I trust him to pull the trigger on it. But I think in a bigger sense of things, I am worried about the bullpen and how many innings they can cover. Because again, like Bizzardo has pitched every game this postseason after seemingly pitch every other game in the regular season. Munoz has had to go a couple innings a couple times, and he didn't do that at all this year. And so Brash is actually been pretty solid in the playoffs, which is a nice surprise. There's not a lot of guys in this bullpen I trust, and it's kind of tough to trust Gabe Spire after his last couple of outings. And in this series, there's not a ton of high quality lefties in this Blue Jays lineup, so I'm not quite sure how they're going to handle him. Is he going to be asked to get George Springer? Is he going to be asked to get Vladdy probably at some point?
Yeah, it's definitely more so going to be Varsho, Lucas, and Barger.
Right,
like those are going to be the key spots.
The guys who are going to kill you, in these spots are going to be Vladdy, Springer, and maybe Bichette. So I'm a little worried about the pitching holding up after the grueling series they just had. But lots to be worried about, lots to be excited about. But I think the bullpen and how Dan manages it is my biggest concern.
Yeah, Anders.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go more starting pitching here because we obviously kind of see them empty the tank in Game 5 against the Tigers, which they had to do. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do whatsoever, but and we see the decision to go to Bryce Miller in Game 1, which is a little questionable to me. Colby, I saw your tweet. You and I have, I think, a similar thought on this. It seems like Castillo would have been a little bit more of a easier decision for me. He's thrown 14 pitches in the 7 days that would lead up to the game versus 55, I believe, for Bryce Miller in the 5 days leading up to the game. I realize he just pitched in the most previous game, but again, that was only 14 pitches. He should be able to get back up to at least close to 100% by Sunday. And he's just been a better pitcher for the entirety of this year. So that's a little bit questionable. But again, then it kind of goes to the question of what's Brian Wu going to look like if he is going to be available. Is George Kirby and Logan Gilbert? I have a little less questions with them. I think they've proven that they're the guys in this part of the postseason. But the Blue Jays just destroyed the Yankees. And I think honestly, similar to how the Detroit series kind of was a tough matchup for Seattle's pitching, I think the Toronto series was a tough matchup for the New York's pitching. And I think I'm not saying that Toronto's a worse offense than Detroit, but I think it matches up a little bit better to Seattle just because they have fewer lefties that really scare me. And Seattle, of course, really only has 2 left-handed pitchers, really only one if you really don't want to see Caleb Ferguson in a game. So it matches up well, but that doesn't mean that everything's going to go to plan. So just the overall starting pitching is what I'm looking at, how they're going to deal with that after emptying the tank in Game 5.
Yeah. So my biggest question really is Bo Bichette's health right now. How's that knee looking? I know he's been doing some light jogging, all of that. There is a thought that he could just exclusively DH in this series, which could create a little bit of a headache there for John Schneider and putting these lineups together, because that's going to have to push George Springer into an outfield spot. And that means that one of Anthony Santander or Nathan Lucas or Dalton Varsho is going to have to hit the bench. So how are they going to work around that? And just how much of an impact is Bichette going to have, especially if he does get on base? So what is that all going to look like? That's a real big piece of this. But I mean, even without Bichette, it's a really, really dangerous lineup, and they've gotten a lot of contributions, obviously from Vlad and Springer and Alejandro Kirk, but like 1 through 9, there's a lot of dudes in this lineup. Ernie Clement has been really solid this year. Nathan Lucas has been really, really good this year. Varsho's had a great season. Barger's been incredible. I mean, we remember what he did to the Mariners when the Blue Jays were in Seattle.
Don't run on that guy.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. Definitely don't do that. So yeah. Yeah, Bichette to me is the biggest question here, is at least on the Blue Jays side of things. And then like you mentioned, Anders, the starting rotation going with Miller in Game 1. What is he going to look like going up against this lineup? This is a very, very different lineup than the Tigers lineup. They foul off a ton of pitches. They put the ball in play a ton. They don't really strike out. Like this is going to be a fascinating matchup for this starting rotation, which doesn't really line up well with this in on paper. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Got some more questions for these guys in just a moment, but first a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. For instant reactions following every Mariners playoff game, be sure to tune in to the Mariners POSTCAST with Anders here and Christopher Crawford, available on both the Locked On Mariners YouTube and podcast feeds. Going through some burning questions heading into the ALCS between the Mariners and the Blue Jays. Next question here. What are your impressions of the Blue Jays, Anders?
They're a really good team. I think you described it well in our last segment there. They're going to really kind of battle in every single at bat offensively. And they have one of the best hitters in baseball in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's also just on a different level right now. At least he was in the Yankee series. Hopefully he got, all of that out in one series. But he's just been a really good player for a long time. I can't overlook George Springer either. He was in the MVP conversation for a lot of this year until it kind of tailed off towards the end. So, I mean, he's been tearing the cover off the ball lately. It's just a really good offense. I don't think the pitching is they don't have a Tarek Skubal. They don't have someone who really scares me where it's like going into game 5. It's like, oh God, what are the Mariners going to do? They just got to get this guy out of the game. But their bullpen has been shaky as well. So that's not necessarily a strength. It's not like they have a long bullpen to rely on. So I think this offense might have a better series in this one versus the Detroit series. But you got to slow down their bats. That's going to be the main thing. It's going to be how effective our pitchers are against that offense is going to be the huge thing for Toronto in this series.
Yeah, they make a lot of contact, which, Mariners pitching hasn't been great at retiring hitters in a timely fashion this year or in the playoffs, really. So, long at-bats are going to happen. You just have to deal with it. I also, perhaps I'm wrong here because I don't watch every Blue Jays game, but they can also run out a defense that is better than anybody in baseball with Varsho and Miles Straw, and even Springer can still play a little bit. And Bichette's solid. Yeah. Bichette's solid if he does play at short.
Yep.
Kirk is one of the better defensive catchers in baseball. Like they can really, prevent runs with their defense, which is great for them because they don't have elite starting pitching. Savage has been very good, as is Gossman. But those are not, as you said, those are not Skubals, and that's no disrespect to them. There's only one Skubal in the world right now. So yeah, the pitching won't be as good. The bullpen probably about on par with Detroit. So
they don't have a Will Vest though.
No, I mean Hoffman's supposed to be that guy, but
he hasn't really been. Yeah.
So like the pitching should be better. Detroit's pitching should be better on paper than anything that Toronto can throw at you, but Toronto's defense is significantly better. And they're starting to hit the home run here in the postseason, and that is a terrifying combination. A team that doesn't strike out and hits home runs, like that's tough. And they catch everything in the air, and they've got 3 center fielders out there. They're really strong up the middle defensively. It's a tough matchup for Seattle, but it is one that didn't go their way this year. But we know that in the past, the Mariners have had pretty good success against the Blue Jays, both in Toronto and in Seattle. So we'll see how it goes for him this year. But yeah, I just think of defense and I think of a relentless lineup that is also starting to hit home runs in the postseason. And that's the trio right there. Elite run prevention and you hit home runs and you don't strike out, you're going to win a lot of ball games.
Yeah. They looked like a wagon in that Yankees series. So yeah, this is going to be a really, really tough lineup to get through. And again, because not only because of the star power and, while Kerry Carpenter is, was fantastic in that series and he was a massive, massive problem to deal with. And, we know about Riley Green and all those guys. that's nothing compared to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the kind of year that George Springer is having at the plate and all that, and Addison Barger's breakout, all that. So this is just a very different lineup to deal with. And on top of that, they're super, super annoying. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this really does come down to, like you mentioned, Anders, getting into that Blue Jays bullpen. That is the very clear defined weakness on this club. And that means that you're going to have to get through Kevin Gossman. You're going to have to get through Shane Bieber, who's been very good since returning to the mound. You got to get through Trey Yesavage, who's been a revelation here over the last couple of weeks. And there's also going to be Max Scherzer potentially, or Chris Bassett. I mean,
is Jose Barrios going to start for them?
Yeah, I think he's out for the year.
Yeah, he's done for the year. Okay. But Scherzer. Like he's not Max Scherzer anymore, right. But that's obviously a guy that's pitched in a ton of big games. And so, that's something that you're going to have to deal with. So getting through those guys, getting into that Blue Jays bullpen, that's going to be the key to the series for the Mariners. All right. Next question here. Outside of the obvious names, give me one key player for both the Mariners and the Blue Jays, Colby.
For the Blue Jays, outside the obvious names, I think it's Jeff Hoffman an obvious name? I expect these games to be close.
Yeah.
And Hoffman has been not what they paid for. He's had moments where he's been pretty good, but for the most part, he's not been what they paid for. And he's going to have to get some big outs in this series. And if he struggles like he has this year, it could cost Toronto everything. So I think Hoffman is probably a name there. Also, I really don't want to see Addison Barger throw guys out again. No, just know the arms, guys. Know the arms. For the Mariners, it's kind of tough to come up with a underrated name because everybody knows everybody. I would say that I think this could potentially be a big Matt Brash series, and I don't know if that's underrated or whatever, but with the number of key righties in this lineup, like Gabe Spire facing the lefties in the last series, this series it's going to come down to Matt Brash or Pizzardo, but we talked about Pizzardo. So I'm going with Brash. And, this is pretty interesting. In game 2, or was it game 2? Brash had the swing and miss stuff, and he gave up a couple runs, although he shouldn't have, the air, blah, blah, blah. But he had swing and miss stuff. And last night he looked really good. Didn't generate many whiffs, and so it really is, you kind of get these two different versions of Matt Brash, one that just gets a ton of ground balls and one that gets a ton of whiffs. You don't know which one you're going to get, but there's a pretty good chance you're going to need both of those guys to show up at some point in the series. And whether he can or can't, I think probably determines the winner of one or two of these games, and 1 or 2 games is the margin.
Yeah, for me, it's Alejandro Kirk for the Blue Jays. He's kind of that connection between those big boys at the top of the lineup and then the underrated stars at the bottom of the lineup. He has really quietly been one of the best catchers in baseball over the past, for the entire season, both offensively and defensively, and he's just continued to do it in the playoffs. So that's going to be one guy that I'm watching. If you kind of limit him, the lineup feels a lot shorter for Toronto, and just in terms of the guys that you can feel confident in going up against, especially later in games. And then for the Mariners, it's Brian Wu. I know it's not necessarily underrated, but having that one extra guy can mean the difference in so many ways. Whether it's getting a guy that's lined up to start on regular rest, whether it's having that extra guy come out of the bullpen. That's the difference between the possibility of maybe seeing Emerson Hancock in this series versus something where everything seems to line up perfectly. One guy can be that entire difference, and having him, if he's healthy and he's who he's been for the entirety of this year, I think that's a huge step for Seattle winning this series.
All right, got a few more questions for these guys in just a moment, but first a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Rougiette. Fellas, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications and 1 dual-action formula, so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to RUGIET.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. We're going over some burning questions heading into the ALCS. Mariners versus Blue Jays kicking off tomorrow night at Rogers Center. Next question here. Now that you've seen this club win a playoff series, do you feel better or about the same about them as you did before the playoffs began, Colby?
About the same. I think, they're a really talented team, and I think they're one of the best teams in baseball, which they're in the Final Four, so obviously. But also, I think they're a flawed team, which means that they are totally susceptible to losing multiple games, and they've been a very streaky team all year, even after the big additions at the trade deadline. So, I think I feel about the same. Like, they could sweep the Blue Jays, and I wouldn't be shocked. They could get swept by the Blue Jays, and I wouldn't be shocked. There's just not a lot of consistency here with this club and with who performs and who doesn't. So, I felt that way about the Tigers series. I know a lot of people thought it was going to be a cakewalk. I think we all kind of tried to pump the brakes on that and be like, it's going to be 4 or 5 really tough games. And I feel like it's probably going to be the same with Toronto, because I just don't know how, what team's going to show up on any given night, or what hitters are going to show up on any given night. But, the Mariners are playing at their 100th percentile and the Blue Jays are playing at their 100th percentile. I think the Mariners are a better team, but how much confidence do I have that they'll play at their 100th percentile? Less than 100%. So it's one of those things where I think I feel about the same. The Mariners could win 8 in a row and hoist the trophy, and cool. I wouldn't be shocked. No, I mean, be shocked, but for a different reason. Or they could just, lose 4 in a row here and be done, and we'll have a weird conversation late in the week next week, and that'll be that. Like, nothing will surprise me with this team. So I really don't think much has changed. There were no big performances that have like if Randy Arozarena had gone like 9 for 19 or something with 3 home runs in this series, and I'm like, oh, Randy's hot. Like, yeah, that might change it. Or if Gino had gotten red hot, that might have changed things, but neither of those things happened.
Nope.
And those 2 guys are kind of like X factors in this. Like, if they get hot at the same time, or even one of them gets hot, that can change everything, but they didn't in this last series. So, pitching was about what I expected. Bullpen was about what I expected. Everybody else kind of did their job. So I feel about the same.
Yeah, I think I feel a little bit better, not by a huge margin, but the main reason for me is because it felt like after game 4, losing in that fashion, when you were up 3-0, you had multiple chances. It felt like it was there for you to win. Detroit felt dead in the water. And then losing that one, kind of foregoing all the momentum, and facing Skubal in game 5, you had all the opportunity to just lay down and kind of be done. And the fact that they didn't do that tells me that these guys are just a different kind of breed than previous Mariners teams that we've experienced in the past. Both that, and I almost feel like, I think part of it in their heads, and I don't know, players are probably different, but for me as a fan, if you had gone out in the ALDS, it still would have felt a lot like this season was a failure in many ways because of how everything lined up. I think you're kind of, in a way, playing with house money at this point. If the Mariners, because they've done something for the first time in 24 years, if they lose in the ALCS, it's like, okay, they still got to this point. I think that's what most fans were at the very least asking for, was to get to this point. I'm not saying I won't be disappointed if they don't move on to the World Series, but it almost feels like the pressure is off a little bit, where the Toronto's the number 1 seed. They're coming in not with home field advantage. They kind of got the Detroit monkey off their back. So it just kind of feels like at this point, the Mariners have gotten to the point in the season where they're playing with house money a little bit. So again, I'm not saying I'm going to be totally okay if they go out in 4 in this, but it feels like they've gotten the monkey off their back and they can just go and win the whole effing thing, according to Cal. So I don't know. I feel a little bit better because they were able to come back a little bit in that Detroit series. Long story short.
Yeah, I should clarify, like in terms of how I view the season. Yeah, it's changed because we talked about this last year or last week. Like, hey, if they lose this series to Detroit, a team they're clearly better than, is it a successful season? I mean, yeah, they won the division.
Yeah.
They were the number 2 seed, but they didn't
Mm-hmm.
advance any further than they did in 2022. But you get to the ALCS, like you get swept. It's still a very successful season.
Yes.
There's really no debate to be had about that. But in terms of like, do I feel better about their odds of winning on a night-to-night basis because they beat the Tigers? No,
Right.
I don't.
Yeah.
I feel about the same. So just to clarify.
Yeah, to your guys' points, I do feel like at the very least, like the pressure on the fan base is kind of lifted.
Yeah.
Because of winning the playoff series. Because again, like you got the 60 homer season out of Cal. You won the division for the first time in 24 years. You made the playoffs for just the second time in 24 years. You know, all these you went out, you made the biggest, boldest trades at the deadline, all that stuff, right? And if you went out and you lost in the first round, that'd be a very tough pill to swallow.
You'd be the Phillies.
Yeah. And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially because there are so many questions that are going to have to be answered going into this offseason. Right.
Yep.
So, so I do feel like at the very least getting to the ALCS, being one of the Final Four teams, also getting past the Tigers team that just you were straight up better than.
Yes.
Like on paper, like, they had a great series, and like shout out to those guys. Like they gave you everything that they had to offer. But it would have sucked, frankly, losing to them. Whereas losing to the Blue Jays, that's a really, really good team. Right. Losing to, if you make it to the World Series, if you lose to the Dodgers or the Brewers or whoever, like those are very, very, very good teams. If that happens, it just is what it is. Like at that point, it's just best on best. Right. And so, we'll see how it goes. But like, I do feel like that aspect of all of this has kind of gone away. And ultimately, no matter what happens here, like obviously we're all going to be disappointed if they get eliminated in this round or if they don't win the World Series. But like, I feel like at the end of it, like we're still going to look back on this season fondly, and look toward 2026 with really nothing but hope. Obviously, a lot of questions, but really, mostly hope after this year.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, like again, if they end up losing this series, if they get swept and look terrible, it's not that I'm not expecting them to win. It's not that I am okay if they lose or anything like that. It's more just like once you look back, I think you put it perfectly there, Ty. Once you look back on this season, I think no matter what happens now, you will find it a success.
Yeah, because I think if you just lost in the ALDS, there just would have been a lot of like coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
And then, we would have spent like the whole offseason talking about blowing the 3-0 lead in game 4 and not winning game 1.
15 innings.
Oh, and all that, right? So like
opportunities.
And then just talking about like the conversation would be about wasting Cal season and all that. And I feel like some of that, I'm sure there will still be a little bit of that involved in the conversation here if they do lose in the ALCS, just because that's just how things are. But in general, I think for the most part, like we can just kind of appreciate the season.
Enjoy
it. I think winning just that playoff series, having that moment last night, I think that like goes a long way for how we talk about the season, no matter what happens from here on out. All right, next question here. I'm not asking you to predict a winner. I never would. But how many games will this series go, Anders?
Ooh, I think it at least goes 6, to be completely honest. I think Toronto's a better team than Detroit, but I still think there are going to be a ton of close games. And the way Toronto plays is in a way another bad matchup for Seattle. But I still think the pitching is going to get the job done. I think they're going to quiet Toronto's bats a little bit more, at least more than the Yankees did. My God. So I still have faith in these guys. There's going to be a couple moments. There's going to be a couple bullpen decisions that make us pull our hair out. It's just the way it goes. But I think it at least goes 6 games.
Mariners in 4.
Wow.
M's in 4.
Because it's the Mariners. I don't really think it matters who they're playing. I think this is going to a game 7. Like I don't.
Game 7, 16 innings.
They could be playing like the Marlins, and I would still predict they would go 7. Like, it's just how the Mariners do business, and so, but yeah, I think this will be a long series. I think if Seattle can steal one of these first 2 games in Toronto, I think that would be huge. You get 3 in a row at home. Hopefully you sweep and you clinch at home and go to the World Series on your home field. But like, whatever, if you can find a way to win 2 or 3 at home, then you're in the driver's seat and all that. So I think winning one of these first 2 games is huge for Seattle. Yeah. And if that does happen, then yeah, I anticipate the series to go at least 6. If Seattle loses these first 2 games, at that point, it's kind of like, I hope it goes 5. Like, let's at least get to a game 5. But so I think these first 2 games are pretty big. And obviously, Toronto's got a huge advantage because they got to sit down and do nothing for the last 2 days there. But I think you can. That's why you can steal one. That's why I say you can try and steal one from Toronto here. If you can do that, then I feel like you're in pretty good shape to get this series to 6 or 7 games. But if you lose these first 2, then I think it might be a 4 or 5 game series, which. Not great, but take what you can get and take your chances. So I guess I'll split the difference and I'll say 6 games like Anders.
So what do we think? This wasn't on my show sheet here, but what do we think the crowd is going to look like at T-Mobile Park? Because a lot is being made of that, and I don't think it's going to be like how these series typically look with all the Blue Jays fans that invade T-Mobile Park. Because I mean, 1, like these tickets were sold in advance, and 2, again, like there's just so much interest, in the Seattle area in this team right now, and to go into these games. So I don't think it'll be like heavy Blue Jays. I think there will be some Blue Jays fans, and probably more Blue Jays fans than there were Tigers fans, but I don't think it's going to be. I don't think we're going to see, like we're going to hear super loud, let's go Blue Jays chants and stuff like that. Like, I don't think we're going to get that, but
I'm skeptical. Sorry, Colby. I'm skeptical of that. I originally I had the same feeling, Ty, but then I kind of thought of it like you could basically pay for most of your posts. If you were one of those lucky fans who gets to buy the entire postseason, you could pay for your whole postseason package by selling one game's worth of tickets because on the secondary market. So I think there's a lot of people that are going to think that way, to be completely honest. I don't think it's going to be anything where close to 50% Blue Jays fans or anything like that, but there will be a large contingent. I think that's just the way it is. And there's a lot of Blue Jays fans that are thinking the same thing. This is basically their home game. It's going to be similar to how it is for during the regular season where, all the people from Vancouver are going to be coming down and they won't get to go to games at Toronto, but they can go to games here. So
right.
I hope it's not. I really, really hope that what you're saying is true, that like the Mariners are the story in town, that there's going to be such a demand for Mariners fans to go to these games that it will kind of overwhelm the demand for Toronto fans. But I just don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case. I really hope I'm wrong.
I think it'll be a noticeable but not overwhelming presence. I'm thinking like, I don't know, they sell out at like 47.5, but for just easy math, we'll call it 50. If there's 50,000 people there, I think 40,000 to 42,000 are Mariner fans, and everybody else is, Blue Jay fan. That'd be my guess. So 15-20% at most. But that's obviously noticeable, and that's sizable. So I don't think it'll be anywhere close to like, plus, when the Blue Jays come into town, those tickets in the regular season, those tickets are like $40.
Yeah.
$60, $70, $350, $400 to get in, and climbing, by the way. So it's one of those things, like, it's not the easiest ticket to get. It's also very expensive. There's also the travel involved and all that. But I do think it'll be a noticeable number of Blue Jay fans, but it won't be anything close to what we see in the regular season.
All right. So last question here. We've talked about key players. We've talked about your biggest questions, all that. What do you think will ultimately determine how this series goes, though, Colby?
Starting pitching versus Springer, Vlad, Bichette, and starting pitching versus Randy, Julio, and Cal. Stars have to be stars. and at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And it's fun when the Leo Rivas come off the bench and they deliver. And it's hilarious when, you score your run off of Skubal with a check swing double and the slowest guy in baseball stealing third base. And the guy who can't hit with 2 strikes gets a screaming liner into center field to like, that's awesome and fun and all that. But you can't have your top 3 guys go 1 for 19 with, 12 strikeouts and expect to win playoff games. And so I think it's going to be this, whoever stars play better. And it's a boring answer. I know, I get that, but like, this is when you need those guys to step up. And Cal had a good series overall. He did not have a very good game at the plate last night, but overall he had a very good series. So I'm not too worried about Cal, especially at that ballpark. But Julio was great in the first 2 games, terrible the next 3. Randy never really got it going. Gino, he had the one moment in Detroit and then he was just nothing. He was worse than nothing. He hurt you. And so it's just one of those things where I think whoever stars play better, they're going to win this game or they're going to win this series. And so how the right-handed heavy Mariners starting pitching and the right-handed heavy Toronto Blue Jays starting pitching attacks these star right-handed hitters plus Cal Raleigh, and whoever has the most success against each other, they're going to win this series. So it's Cal versus Springer. It's Cal versus Vlad. It's Julio versus Springer. It's Randy versus Kirk. Like, that is going to determine who wins this series. Whoever stars play better, they're going to win.
Yeah, I think in general, I would say the starting pitching for the Mariners, but since you kind of already touched on that, I'll be different. And I'll go the bullpens, because we cannot have bad Gabe Spire like we've got in the last 2 games. We cannot have a blowout from Bizzardo. And the usage is going to be another thing that I'm looking at. And that's the part where, we talked about it earlier. I think if there's one area, maybe starting pitching as well, but one area where the Mariners have the distinct advantage, it is in either the starting pitching or the bullpen. So once you get to the bullpen parts of these games, they're going to be close. Like, there's not going to be very many blowouts. You have to take advantage of those. On both sides, whether it's the Blue Jays playing above what we expect them to be, or the Mariners, playing below, there's gonna be ways where this game's become closer than they need to be. So I think if the Mariners do what they need to do in the bullpen, whether it, like I said, Gabe Spire, I think Matt Brash is a great call, Colby, in terms of a big guy in this series. He's actually had better, splits versus lefties than righties this year, which is a weird thing. So I'm interested to see how that looks. Bizzardo, I think, looked so good last night that I almost forget his blow up earlier in the series. Munoz has been absolutely nails all season and the last series as well. The big one's going to be Gabe Spire for me, and then anyone else that you have to use at that point, whether it's a starter coming out of the bullpen or anything like that, it's going to be massive. So I'm going to go bullpen usage and effectiveness as what's going to tell me, or how we're going to evaluate this series coming down to the last couple of games.
Yeah, I just say this as well. I said it kind of as a joke in the last one of these we did. Assuming he makes the roster, you might need Emerson Hancock in the series.
I know,
like with the righties that come up, and with Hancock's new arm slot and the big sweeper, and then going like very kind of Colin Snyder-esque from last year, maybe a little Paul Sewald, loopier slider though, sweeper, whatever we're calling it. You might not have a choice. This
is real character development, folks. This is Emmy award-winning character development. We are at the point in the year that Colby's like, we might need Emerson Hancock.
I don't like that we're here, but this is what happens when you don't give up the extra prospect to go get Duran. So yeah, you need somebody to step up, and call me crazy, but I kind of trust Hancock right now more than I trust Caleb Ferguson and more than I trust Luke Jackson. So
Vargas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too crazy, but perhaps. Vargas is sketchy, but we'll see how many of those guys even make the roster. I don't know if there's going to be substantial changes there, but makes me want to take a look at Michael Fulmer a little bit, but anyways, yeah, so we'll see how it goes, but it does feel like you're going to need somebody not in your core 4 bullpen arms. They need to step up. So whether that's Hancock, whether it's Vargas, whether it's somebody not on the roster right now, or maybe it's Brian Wu pitching exclusively out of the bullpen, I don't know. but it feels like you're going to need somebody besides one of those 4 guys to step up, because you've ridden those guys hard all year. You've rode them hard in the last playoff series, and those things stack up on top of each other. So you're going to need a 5th guy to emerge. You were hoping it was going to be Caleb Ferguson. I think that ship has sailed quite a while ago. And so is it Vargas? It has been at times, but he's still super sketchy. So who is that 5th guy going to be? I don't know, but I can't imagine you're going to win this series if the only 4 guys you're willing to use out of your bullpen are the 4 guys you've used all year.
1, you need to get Rowdy back somehow. 2, I think you should let the Blue Jays get a big lead. I don't know, something like maybe 8-1, just random score that, just pops into my head. I think at that point you might have them right where you want them.
Sounds about right.
All right. That is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode and Anders Hirst, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez, Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11, and Anders at Anders Hirst. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, Anders at Anderson Hirst, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.